Moir. I was not ever a coordinator at the Women's Center, although I moved here in 1975 from Lethbridge, Alberta, the deep south. And I worked at the Women's Center there in the early 1970s and at the first birth control center in Lethbridge, which you can imagine, the deep heart of Mormon country. So it's really, you can see that our earliest issues were really healthcare issues. Our bodies ourselves had come out. I think I still have a speculum in a drawer somewhere. We all were examining each other all over the place. But I became very involved in the pro-choice movement. And in the mid-'80s, that was a huge battle here because every hospital board had the right to decide whether or not abortions could be permitted in that hospital. And this was a very big battle in Nelson between the Nelson Right to Life group and the the pro-choice group. Just before I get really started, I want to thank very much the Nelson Museum because I was also a reporter at the time, and I had a whole box of materials, my private notes, newspaper clippings, and the kind of things that you can't give away because you become such a burden in your home to have these big boxes of history. The Nelson Museum took them, sorted them into files, thinks this is a very important era and doesn't have a lot of material from it. So I was very lucky that I could phone them and say, can I have that box back? And they gave it back to me organized. But there were a couple major events that happened, and I'm also important that we learned is coalitions with women who we might not normally think that we would have a coalition with. And one of those groups was the hospital auxiliaries. These women have worked forever, very hard for the hospital. In 1985, Jim Demers, who still lives in Nelson, walked into the Nelson Hospital, which had very little security at the time, took the vacuum aspirator, which was used for performing abortions, rolled it out, and brought it back later and changed into something else. This deeply offended the hospital auxiliaries. We feminists created a coalition with the hospital auxiliary. Sam Simpson and I joined the South Spokane Hospital Auxiliary and helped out with maybe a bake sale. But those older women were our allies because they knew what it meant for women to be butchered in backstreet abortions. These were not women who spent all of their time crocheting doilies. These were women who had, that's a good thing to do, but they had many political interests at all, and they were interested in forming a coalition with us. We organized so hard because we had to sell memberships in the hospital, to become a member of the hospital, to vote at the board meetings, you had to become a member. There are piles of notes in there of everybody we put forward to become a hospital board member on the board itself, what their politics were, who they were related to, how we could talk to them, notes and notes and notes and notes. So we had, one of the biggest meetings was 500 people at the Nelson Arena. 500 people, and we voted in a pro-choice board, because at that point, if you didn't have a pro-choice board, there were no abortions before. Some of the other things we did, we had a huge, this is 400 name petition, powered by choice, in the Nelson Daily News. 400 people paid for this ad. And we also had, Betty Daniel is in this picture, and we had many a demonstration. This was when the Nelson pro-choice, anti-choice group put out a very lurid pamphlet of dead fetuses that went into every mailbox in Nelson. And it was not enclosed in an envelope or anything like that. And we fought that, and Canada Post eventually changed its policy. At that time, Joe Borowski, who was the big national anti-choice campaigner, came to Nelson to help raise funds for Jim Demers. I could go on and on, but it was an incredible time. And just to go back to the hospital auxiliaries, those women were so offended by what had happened to their hospital and how one issue group was trying to take it over. Their credibility helped so much, and eventually we also got the hospital boundaries expanded into the Spokane Valley because those women were not allowed to be members of the Nelson Hospital, the organization. So there were many struggles at that time, but we worked lists. there were three of us, in particular, Sandra Lane, and Sam Simpson and I, and many people in this room too, but we worked our tails off, and we did not leave one detail uncovered. However, interestingly, after 400 people paid for this ad, many people wouldn't join up. They would pay the $5 membership because they sort of had enough. They were tired of it. Nelson Right to Life skunked us and took over the board again, so we had to fight the whole thing over. So it just doesn't end. I mean, we fought those battles, and now women do have the right to choice, but it came on the backs of a lot of women and men working in coalition. So thank you very much.